And so imagine this takes place. I have a top hat, and in that top hat, I kind of perform this special trick for you. What I do is I say, I'm going to pull a rabbit out of this hat. And so I hold the top hat there. It's a black top hat, very traditional magician kind of top hat. And I got it there, and I have my hand, and I stick the hand in the hat, and out of nowhere, I pull out a rabbit. I mean, would you be impressed with that? What if I followed up that magical act by saying, listen, that was not an illusion. That actually happened. I pulled the rabbit out of the hat, and there was nothing, and then there was something, right? Imagine that took place. Let's take it a step further, okay? What if I took multiple rabbits? Let's say 10 rabbits. Let's say 1,000 rabbits, okay? I reached in there and I pulled out a pile, like a mound of rabbits out of nowhere. So out of nothing, there became a pile of 1,000 rabbits. Would you be amazed that that actually happened? And I explained to you that that is not an illusion. That was actually magic. That actually took place. Now let's take it a step further. What I'm going to have you do is watch this video. This video is about the power of 10 magnifications. So we're going to zoom out by 10 each scenario. I want you to watch what this does and the complexity and the magnitude of our universe. Check it out. Okay, so imagine this is the case. All that you just saw, everything that there ever was, there ever has been, everything you can see, everything that there is now, all the stars, planets, moons, everything imaginable in all of the universe or theoretically multiverse, all of that is pulled out of a hat. From nothing came everything. Are you tracking with me? Is it rational to believe that? Or is it irrational to believe that? And we are, we've been kind of dealing with this. And the thing that I always hear is this idea or this phrase, like, I would believe in God if there was any proof. I would believe in God if there was any proof at all whatsoever that he existed. Then I might take a leap to believe in him. And that's more and more what I hear. That's more and more what the world thinks, a world marked by skepticism. Although we know verses like our theme verse for the series in Hebrews chapter 11, verse 1, which reads, "Now faith is confidence in what we hope for, assurance about what we do not see." We, if we're honest, we still desire the evidence for God. Because that gives proof. It validates his existence and really our belief system. See, others want proof to believe altogether, and they won't take a jump from unbelief to belief until they get the proof of God's existence. The thing is that God's proof of existence will not satisfy everybody. He's given everyone two gifts: the gift of reason and the gift of revelation. So that we may not only know that he exists, but that he's worthy of our trust. And so we have those two things. We got reason and we have revelation. And both of those two things are very important for us to understand in our leap of faith in understanding that God is real. Now, today, what I'd like to do in week 2 of this series, Leap of Faith, is go back to the chart that we looked at in week 1. Now, this chart, what we did is we highlighted two core belief systems in society. One was the belief that God does not exist. That's an atheist. The other was the belief that God does exist, and that is the advocate. But what we also talked about was the father of lies, in that he tries to, and he's really successful, to be honest, he tries to make us believe that there's far more than just those two scenarios, that God exists or that he doesn't exist. And really what we end up believing is that there's multiple ways, multiple belief systems out there. In fact, the largest segment would be the one in the chasm here called agnostic. And what we said we'd do through this series is take a look at these three categories and dissect each one with the understanding that at least atheists have a little bit of foundation and advocates have a little bit of foundation, but this middle section, agnostics, they don't really know what they believe. There's no foundation to their belief system. They might believe that there's a higher power or higher existence or something that's created everything, but they don't really have where that is. There's no foundation there. And so our goal is that you would kind of take the rational leap of faith here from unbelief to belief, and that it would be irrational for you to believe anything differently. See, the Bible, what it teaches us as we jump into the category here of atheists, the Bible teaches us that atheists are not really atheists. Atheists actually believe in God. Now, that might be confusing for you, but they profess to be atheists, but they ultimately believe God in their heart of hearts. And the Bible teaches us that everybody knows God. Everybody does. You can find scriptures like this. In Romans 1:19-20, it says this: "Since what may be known about God is plain to them, because God has made it plain to them, for since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power, his divine nature has been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that people are without excuse." And so the Bible tells us that God's design and his creation, his existence, is so obvious that anyone who opposes that, it says, is without excuse. See, the atheist denies that there is a God with their lips, but in their heart, they know that there actually is one. They talk about there's not one, but they really think or understand in their heart of hearts that there is. But I know what you're saying. Like, if an atheist knows that there is a God, then why are they saying that there is no God? Well, let me explain it like this. I believe that atheists believe in God, but they don't communicate that. And here's why I think they believe in God. Because their actions do not follow what their lips are saying. And so their lips say that there's no God, but their actions and their lifestyle, their worldview, says that there is. They live their lives as if there is a God. And let's be frank here. As Christians, we know that it's hard to live out what you believe. And the same thing is true with atheism. It's hard to live out actually what you believe with your everyday life. And so let me highlight for you today 4 main categories that atheists really have a difficult time living out what they believe. And the first one is this: design. It's the category of design. And I'll point you to a passage. It's Psalm 19, verse 1, and it says this: "The heavens declare the glory of God, the skies proclaim the work of his hands." And so it's several years ago, Emily and myself and our new son, Brayson, were in California. And one of my favorite places that I've ever been to is called Yosemite National Park. It's just a beautiful, beautiful spot. And in that, there's a huge, enormous forest that has sequoia trees, just massive, massive trees. We were walking through this forest when all of a sudden in the distance, I notice a bench that is there. See, this bench is unlike any I've ever seen. It's actually made from a stump of a sequoia tree. Over time, the wind and the rain have molded and shaped this stump of a tree into a beautiful bench. No man has created this thing, but over time, it was created. And what I said that day was, wow, look at nature. It has created this beautiful bench over the course of years. And now we sit on it and enjoy it. See, my claim that time, chance, and matter had created design, order, and beauty is actually ridiculous. Now, that might have been somewhere to sit, a stump of a tree. Yes, that is a nice thing. Yes, the wind and the rain eventually made a stump a more pleasurable place to sit. But the forces of nature are powerless to create a perfectly carved, intricate, multi-piece bench. Because if you were to see a multi-piece, perfectly carved, intricate bench, you would know that a designer had to create the design and build the bench. It doesn't just happen by itself. See, as you observe the world that we live in, study its design. Look all around you. Look at the order and look at the beauty. Consider the placement of the planets. Consider the rotation of the earth, the complexities of the human body. You look at those things, the activity of a cell, it all points to a designer. The complexity of it all points to a creator. And Christianity, we believe, the advocate believes that God is the creator. He's the designer. I have never seen by chance what is claimed in the Big Bang at the beginning of time, apparently. I have never seen that take place. In all of my existence, and actually all of recorded history, we have never seen by chance an elephant show up in the auditorium of Southgate by chance. We have never seen the International Space Station appear out of nowhere and all put together the complexities of that thing from nothing into something. And in saying that, what that means is a disgrace for you. Because you are by chance. And I don't believe that. What I believe is that you are a miracle. You are designed perfectly. You were made for a purpose and a reason. And if you are by chance, life isn't worth living. You were made for far more, and you are marked by a designer. And so if you believe in design and you live that out, you're actually living out what you do not believe. Does that make sense? The second kind of problem that atheists have in their lifestyle, that how that counters their belief system, is this idea of desires. I'll point your attention to Ecclesiastes 3:11. It reads like this: "He has made everything beautiful in its time. He has also set eternity in the human heart. yet no one can fathom what God has done from the beginning to the end. You see, what we would understand is that all desires can be fulfilled. If I want money, I can work hard and earn it. If my stomach is growling and I'm hungry, I can go and eat some food. If I am tired, I can take a nap. If I need to get somewhere, I can get in a car and get to wherever I want to go. If you're lonely, you can have a friend. There's one human desire, though, that people really struggle with. It's the longing to worship. We all have it. It just comes out and expresses itself in different ways. We all worship something because it's inside of us. It's who we are. The world sings with this, right? That's how movies make millions and some billions of dollars, because we long to worship them. That's why artists and create albums and they sell millions of copies, because people are fans and they long to worship something. And so whether it's a band or a celebrity or a song or a movie or a show or a game, a hobby, the things that the soul finds delight in is our longing for worship. It's our longing for something more. The problem with each of those items is that they don't fulfill it. Because earthly things that you worship can never long your real desire within you. See, when our worship fails to reach beyond the things of this world, we long for more, and like a person who always eats but is never satisfied, short-sighted worship finds no fulfillment in this life, because the world is not capable of meeting our deep desire to worship. And that's why an atheist will live from one thing to another, from a house to a car to a vacation to a great restaurant. You long for the next thing because it never satisfies you. An advocate can live, or should be living, in contentment because their soul is satisfied with the missing element that they need. In fact, C.S. Lewis, he concluded this: if I find in myself desires which nothing in this world can satisfy, the only logical explanation is that I was made for another world. Similarly, Augustine, he says this: our hearts are restless until they can find rest in Him. See, all desires in the world have fulfillment, but Christianity believes that God alone fulfills the heart's deepest desires and the deepest needs that we long for, and that's to worship Him. It breaks down. Let me highlight the third problem that atheists have in their lifestyle according to what they believe. It's the cause and effect rule. In Genesis 1:1, it reads like this: in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And so what I want you to do is I want you to imagine this scenario. Imagine you walk into a room, and in that room, there's a series of dominoes. For our purposes today, we have some 2x4s, all right? And so we have, the dominoes are all lined up in this room, and in that room, you notice that they're already knocked down. And so the dominoes are lined up, they're already knocked down. And so let's just do that. And so going into that room, seeing that the dominoes are already knocked down, the logical explanation of that is that the first one, you can trace all the dominoes back to the very first one, but the first one needed something to happen to make the rest of them fall. Does that make sense? If you look at the last one, it had one that knocked into it. It had one that knocked into it. It had another one that knocked into it. But they had to start somewhere. There had to be one. And the first one needed a cause to get the effect. It needed it. Because we understand in our rational minds that dominoes cannot fall themselves. That cars cannot move themselves without pressing the gas or some electronic signal. Things need a cause. Our world would be insanely crazy if that was not the case, but that's the rule that we understood. We logically understand that there had to be a child or an individual who pushed the first domino to make the rest fall. Now imagine each of those dominoes was an event in our world. Let's say you. Did you magically appear from nothing? No. I don't need to talk about the birds and the bees, but there needed to be a man and a woman to make you. There needed to be a cause to get the effect, right? You walking with me here? You understand? And everything that we see in our world needed a cause to get the effect that we see or we experience. Now imagine if we trace all of those back, just like the dominoes. We go from present reality and go throughout all history, all the way back to the beginning. In the very beginning of the Big Bang, what was the cause? See, you gotta go back to somewhere, but eventually you have the first domino. The first domino needs a cause to get the effect. And that breaks down the atheist view of what they know to be true in their reality and their world. It needs an outside cause. The Christian believes that the outside cause is God, because he's always been and he always will be. Let's talk about the last difficult thing that the atheist struggles with in their actions and their lifestyle according to what they believe. And this is conscience. Romans 2:15, it reads like this: they show that the requirement of the law are written on their hearts, their conscience also bearing witness, and their thoughts sometimes accusing them, and all other times even defending them. And so occasionally we flip on the TV, if you still have cable, and you flip on the TV, and you see a court case taking place. It's all over the news. It's like a high-profile court case. And imagine someone has killed someone else. There's a murder that's taken place. It's an atrocious thing or an atrocious event. Someone is on trial. It goes on for days and weeks. And finally, the moment that we've all been waiting for, the jury comes back. And what we all know is that this individual or this event, this individual is guilty of this thing, but the jury comes back and says, not guilty. Imagine the person who died is the son or daughter of the atheist. And their murderer just got off. Now, anyone logically would be upset about that. What do you mean? I demand justice. There has to be justice because people would respond with outrage, anger. At times, we even see in our world riots based on the injustices of the world, right? See, a wrong has been committed, no punishment was received, and that bothers us to the core. And see, in such moments, humanity grieves injustices because people believe ultimately in a right and a wrong, don't they? We all do. Right actions ought to be rewarded. Wrong actions ought to be punished. I think we would all agree on that. Whether it's a hideous crime, a simple personal grievance, we often appeal to a higher standard of morality as human beings, and it collectively kind of exists among all of us in humanity. There's right and wrong. There's good and bad. Something that we all share is a conscience. We know that. We understand that. We get that. And if this standard is based on the belief of culture, as some people believe, then why do all cultures at times seem to agree on the basic standard of right and wrong? You're not always just a product of how you were raised. You're not always a product of just like growing up in this particular culture or this particular scenario. If that standard doesn't exist, we are no longer able to make claims for right and wrong. We're no longer able to say that this is wrong because that person grew up in the culture that would say that it's right. And good, bad, just, unjust. It's to declare things like the Holocaust or child abuse or simple everyday harms are done and are acceptable based on the way someone grew up or their culture. as a society or as an individual. And the thing is that none of us would say that those are okay. None of us. Because collectively, we all agree that there's something within us that is able to say that is wrong. And it deserves to be punished. And this is right, and it deserves to be rewarded. And if you are by chance, and if we are made up a blob of cells for no reason or purpose, why would we ever think that that's important? You see, Ravi Zacharias put it this way. When you say there's too much evil in the world, you assume that there's good. When you assume there's good, you assume there's such thing as a moral law on the basis of which to differentiate between good and evil. But if you assume a moral law, you must posit a moral law giver. But that's who you're trying to disprove and not prove. Because if there's no moral lawgiver, then there's no moral law. If there's no moral law, there's no good. And if there's no good, then there's no evil. It's a brilliant way to think about it, in that where do we get our moral value and conscience from? How do we have that? What is the basis for morals and values and ethics? There has to be a lawgiver, and as Christians, we would know who the lawgiver is, and we would advocate that God is the lawgiver. See, there is ultimate proof in a God, and in subsequent weeks, we're going to be looking at that. But John 1:14 reads like this, "And the Word became flesh, He dwelt among us, and we have seen His glory, glory as of only the Son from the Father, full of grace and truth." But no matter what, the atheist will not believe that proof exists. In fact, Richard Dawkins, an outspoken atheist, was once asked, if there turns out to be a God, what will you say to Him when you die? And Dawkins responded, "I would say to God, why did you take such great pains to conceal yourself and hide away from us?" See, what I believe is that God has not hidden Himself away from us at all. In fact, I would say that He's done the opposite. He has come to us. And I would say the way that in which He did that is through His Son Jesus, who came as God in the form of a man. The problem is that the atheist willingly ignores that. See, the reality is that the proof of God is all around us. Everywhere you turn, and even as you look at yourself. And in the individual story of life change that has happened to you and I, or can happen to you, that other people cannot deny. But just because there's proof, it doesn't mean people will believe. Because even as we see recorded in the Bible and many other texts, Jesus walked the earth and performed countless miracles that hundreds, if not thousands of people witnessed, believers and non-believers alike, people in each of these three categories. And even though they saw dead people come back to life, people healed of incurable diseases, and restoration and redemption fulfilled, they still chose not to believe. See, ultimately, the choice is yours, and that's what a loving God does. He gives you the choice of how you will behave and what you believe. And so my question for you is, what do you believe? What are you willing to wager based on that belief? Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we're all believing in something. And God, I believe that you are God and that I'm not. And that you ultimately hold the keys. You ultimately are the creator of everything. You ultimately created me. And it's almost an insult to myself if I deny that. And so, God, I pray that maybe someone who's here today, that you would just speak to them in a very significant and in a very supernatural way. That they would understand that there's more than this life. And God, ultimately, that you would convict them to take a leap from disbelief to belief. God, we just pray these things in the name of Jesus. Amen.